Hey guys, tonight we're putting on our aprons, bracing ourselves for the smell of boiling cabbage, and plunging straight into the bustling, back-breaking, and occasionally bedbug-infested world of Irish immigrant maids in 1900s New York. That's right, forget Downton Abbey, and please, for your own sanity, forget whatever's happening in Bridgerton. We're going straight to the source. Crowded tenements, bosses with more money than mercy, and a city where the rats are unionized and possibly have better dental care than you do. Before we get into the heartbreak and hilarity of scrubbing Gilded Age chamber pots and inventing ways to not die of boredom or scurvy, do me a favor. Like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me if you've ever had a job so bad you still wake up sweating at 3 a.m. about it, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Otherwise, just sit back and judge me quietly. Now dim those lights, put a fan on for that calming, industrial tenement hum, get cozy, and maybe check under the bed for the ghost of Mrs. O'Malley. Let's pause for a moment and really think about what we're getting ourselves into tonight. Have you ever wondered what it was like to clean a millionaire's silverware with soap that's 90% sand? Or why every Irish maid in New York had arms like a professional wrestler and a permanent squint from dodging airborne potatoes? What exactly did room and board mean when the room was a converted closet? And the board was so stale you could shingle a roof with it. Did Irish maids ever get a day off? Or was Sunday just code for work slightly slower in secret? Was the accent an asset or a liability? Did anyone actually drink the water? Or was that considered attempted suicide? And just how many times could you be accused of stealing the good cutlery before you actually started considering it? Congratulations. You've just woken up in a boarding house on the Lower East Side, 1903. Your shift starts in 6 minutes. Someone is yelling in Yiddish next door. A horse just relieved itself in the street outside your window, and you're expected to make breakfast for a family of 6 before you've even had a chance to regret your life choices. Welcome to America, kid. Welcome to New York Harbor. The Statue of Liberty is smaller than you expected, the air smells like coal smoke and dreams on fire, and the only thing louder than the city is your heart pounding in your chest. You and 300 of your new closest friends are herded off a boat and onto Ellis Island, where someone will immediately mangle your last name and you'll start answering to it for the rest of your life. Let's set the scene. You're carrying everything you own in a battered trunk and a memory of your mother's warning to never trust a man with a mustache or a contract. You look around. There are people from every corner of the world. Italians clutching rosaries, Germans fanning themselves with official papers, a family from Poland with a goose. You're not sure how they got it through customs, but you respect the hustle. The line moves like cold molasses. At every step, you worry you're standing in the wrong queue. Is this the one for a new life, or for being sent back because your left eyelid twitches when you're nervous? The waiting hall echoes with instructions in a dozen languages, most of which are shouted, and all of which feel slightly threatening. You clutch your coat tighter, partly for comfort and partly because you're pretty sure someone's already tried to steal it twice. The official at the desk looks up, glances at your paperwork, then at your face, and just like that, your old life is over. You're now Annie O'Toole instead of Ain O'Tuathale, and the only thing more foreign than this new name is the concept of free public schooling. Your head is spinning with the sheer noise of it all. Somewhere in the distance, a baby wails. A grandmother faints. A man with a thick Brooklyn accent is already trying to sell you a map of the city for the bargain price of $2 and your eternal soul. You haven't even made it out of the building, and you're already learning rule number 1 of America. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. If it sounds terrible, it's probably just Tuesday. You shuffle forward, blinking in the unfamiliar electric lights, clutching your papers, and praying you pass the next inspection. Health checks are done in a style best described as cattle market meets surprise party. A doctor with a cold stethoscope stares into your eyes, makes you cough, and mutters something about trachoma. You have no idea what that is, but you nod and hope it's not fatal or, worse, contagious only among the Irish. You practice looking healthy. You try not to limp, even though your shoes haven't fit since Liverpool. When you're finally stamped and allowed through, you get a brief glimpse of Manhattan, a jagged forest of chimneys and church spires, crowded with so many buildings. You start to worry the whole thing will tip into the river if one more steamboat docks. It's not quite the land of milk and honey, more like the land of streetcar clangs, shouting matchmakers, and mysterious puddles that you really hope are just rainwater. The noise never stops. If you close your eyes, it sounds like hope and chaos got married and invited every pigeon in the world to the reception. You're swept along with the crowd, clutching your new American identity and wondering how much of the old one you'll be able to keep. Already, you're feeling the sharp edge of homesickness, missing the boggy quiet of home, the taste of real butter, even the way rain used to fall sideways into your kitchen. But there's no time for nostalgia. The city is hungry, the tenements are waiting, and so is the help wanted sign in a window that you can just barely read. There's no grand welcome, no parade. Just a push toward the future, a chorus of voices in the street, and 1,000 promises floating in the air, some as real as the ache in your feet, most as hollow as the space left in your pocket after the man with the maps walks away. Welcome to America, the land of unfulfilled promises, and the place where you're about to learn what it really means to start over, with nothing but your wits, your hands, and the memory of how to make a good cup of tea. And as the sun sets behind the skyline, you realize the adventure has only just begun. Tomorrow, you'll find work, or work will find you. Tonight, you'll sleep with one eye open, listening to the lullaby of trains, sirens, and the faint, familiar sound of someone singing in Irish far down the hall. Before you can set foot on American soil, you're poked, prodded, and asked questions you don't understand by a man with an alarming mustache. You pray you pass the health inspection, mostly because you've heard stories about the button hook. And no, you do not want to find out what it's for. Let's talk about anxiety. Not the mild kind you get when someone asks you, "How's your day going?" and you realize you have no idea. No, this is the high-octane, heart-pounding, armpits sweating through your one good shirt kind. The sort of anxiety that comes from standing in a line the length of County Cork, clutching all your worldly possessions, and waiting for a doctor who's about to decide your entire future with a 5-second glance and a suspiciously large metal hook. It's not exactly what you pictured when you heard the golden door would be opened to you. You shuffle forward, inch by inch, feeling like livestock on market day. The man behind you sneezes and you try not to panic, because you're fairly sure the only thing more suspicious than having lice is being seen as contagious. Every time someone's name is called, everyone in line tries to pretend they're not listening for the verdict. But you are. Oh, you are. Good luck is muttered in at least 6 languages, and you start thinking you'll never want to hear another phrase with luck in it again. The health inspectors don't look particularly cheerful, probably because they've spent the last 6 hours staring into terrified eyes and the last 6 years trying not to catch anything. Their tools are a mix of modern science and medieval threat: thermometers, tongue depressors, and the dreaded button hook, a device designed to flip eyelids inside out in search of trachoma. But in your mind, it's one step away from a medieval torture device. You do your best to avoid eye contact, but that's exactly what gets you picked out of line for closer examination. Congratulations. You're asked your name, age, place of birth, and occupation. Then you're asked to pronounce your name twice. It turns out no one in New York can pronounce Afe. So you become Eva by bureaucratic fiat. The official jots something down, possibly cannot spell her own name. Probable anarchist. You're then asked about your finances, your family, and whether you have a job waiting. You lie. Of course you do. It's New York. Everyone lies. But the real excitement begins with the physical. You're lined up, coat off, shoes off, dignity off. The inspector checks your scalp for lice, your face for rashes, and your hands for signs of work. You do your best to look robust but not suspiciously athletic, healthy but not sickly, and most importantly, lice-free. It's like the world's least fun talent show. All the while, the rumors swirl. If they find lice, you'll be quarantined on the island for weeks, staring longingly at Manhattan across the water. If you cough, you're doomed. If you have a limp, they'll mark your coat with chalk, and you'll spend the rest of your life explaining to strangers why you failed America's entrance exam. Some say they turn people away for having flat feet, which is either medical science or just a particularly American prejudice. Somewhere down the hall, a child wails as his hair is examined. You spot an elderly woman being led away gently by a nurse, and you wonder if she'll ever see her family again. It's hard not to be swept up in the drama, but the truth is, survival here is all about performance. You keep your head high, your cough silent, and your lice, if you had any, deep, deep in denial. Finally, you're waved through. You survived. You didn't pass out, cough, or accidentally confess to an international crime. No button hook for you today. You step out onto American soil feeling like you've won a very strange, extremely itchy lottery. And yes, your head will itch for the next week because trauma has a way of living in your scalp. Behind you, the line goes on. Ahead of you, New York waits, noisy, crowded, and more judgmental than the inspector with the mustache. But for now, you're in. You made it. You've beaten the odds, the button hook, and the pleasant hook. Bureaucrats. Welcome to the land of opportunity. Please don't scratch your head. Your new home is a 6th-floor walk-up, where the wallpaper is held together with hope and cockroach droppings. There are 12 people in 3 rooms, 1 window, and the bathtub is located in the hallway. Privacy is a rumor, and sleep is a competitive sport. Let's get specific. The stairs creak with every step, and the scent of boiled cabbage, old socks, and last night's fish stew hangs in the air like a heavy wool blanket. Each floor you climb, your suitcase gets heavier, your dreams get a little more realistic, and the odds of seeing daylight from your bedroom diminish exponentially. The building's landlord hasn't made an appearance in years. Rumor has it he only exists when it's time to collect the rent or when the city inspector comes by, which is roughly as often as Halley's Comet. You're greeted at the door by a symphony of shouting, laughter, and a baby who's apparently allergic to silence. The front room doubles as a bedroom, kitchen, and, depending on the weather, a sauna or a meat locker. Your assigned sleeping space is either a pull-out cot, a corner of the floor, or, if you're really unlucky, the bit under the kitchen table where you'll be sharing your pillow with an ambitious colony of ants and someone's left shoe. The window, a rare architectural feature, is your lifeline to the outside world, if you can wedge it open. Sometimes it lets in a breeze, but mostly it invites in soot, street noise, and the charming aroma of horse manure from below. At night, the city is never quiet. There's the clang of trolley cars, the shouts of a fruit vendor who refuses to acknowledge that midnight isn't peak business hours, and the thump of your neighbor's broom as she warns the rats to stay on their side of the wall. You'd think 12 people would make for lively conversation, but mostly it's a battle for resources. The single bathroom is down the hall and shared with at least 3 other families, each of whom has a wildly different opinion about how to clean a bathtub. The correct answer, apparently, is to never do it. The morning routine is an obstacle course. If you're not fast, you'll be brushing your teeth in a coffee cup while someone else yells at you to stop hogging the good towel. There's always a mysterious puddle in the hallway, and you learn quickly not to ask where it came from. Meals are communal affairs, a rotating menu of bread, potatoes, and whatever was on sale at the market, stewed into oblivion and stretched with onions, and the eternal hope that nobody finds the weevil in their portion. Dinner conversation is less about table manners and more about volume. Whoever shouts loudest gets the last bit of stew and the best gossip. Let's not forget the wildlife. Roaches are your most reliable roommates, always up for a midnight stroll across the countertop or a quick swim in the sugar bowl. Mice are the uninvited guests. And bedbugs? They're the neighborhood welcoming committee. You stop counting bites and start rating them for style. But it's not all misery. Sometimes, when the sun hits the window just right, and you catch a whiff of someone baking bread downstairs, you feel almost at home. The laughter, loud, raucous, and echoing through thin walls, reminds you that survival here isn't just about enduring, but about clinging to joy wherever it pops up. Even if it's sandwiched between arguments over laundry and late-night lullabies, sung by a neighbor with the world's worst singing voice. Here's the secret. You adapt. You get used to sleeping through noise that would wake the dead. You learn to cook for 12 with 3 potatoes and a wooden spoon. You become an expert at making space where there is none, stealing moments of privacy behind a curtain, or daydreaming on the fire escape with your feet dangling over a city that feels both impossibly big and painfully close. So yes, your tenement may be a little slice of chaos, but it's your chaos. The first place that's yours, even if it's only for a little while, and even if you have to share it with 12 other souls and 1,000 insects. Home, sweet home, just watch out for the leaky ceiling and don't ask about the stains. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. The Irish accent, it turns out, is your most valuable asset, and also the reason Mrs. Bernstein on Orchard Street squints at you. You line up with dozens of other girls on a Monday morning, all hoping to be picked for a live-in maid job, because the alternative is starvation or, worse, working in a sweatshop. Picture the scene. It's barely dawn, but the maid market is already buzzing. The sidewalk is crowded with hopeful girls, all shapes and sizes, the air heavy with nervous chatter, and the kind of competitive energy usually reserved for Olympic tryouts or church bake sales. You clutch your best, well, your least stained dress, smoothing the skirt and praying that your one pair of boots doesn't squeak too loudly as you shift from foot to foot. There's no formal process here. No sign-up sheet. This is survival, New York style. First come, first scrutinized, first hired. Around you, languages mingle. English with thick Kerry vowels, Yiddish, Polish, a smattering of German. Someone coughs. Someone else elbows their way to the front with the kind of energy that only comes from skipping breakfast and hope. The newspaper ad promised good wages, room and board, but conveniently omitted the bit about the 15-hour workdays and the family dog that likes to bite. The women seeking maids are on the hunt, sharp-eyed and well-dressed, scanning the line for signs of honesty, stamina, and the kind of desperation that can be leveraged for 50 cents less per month. They tap canes, adjust hats, and exchange whispered comments about character and disposition. You hear snippets. That one looks sturdy. Too pale, she'll faint in the laundry. Irish? At least she'll work hard, and she won't talk back much. That's what they think. If you're lucky, you get a quick once-over, a few brisk questions. Can you scrub floors? Boil laundry? Keep your mouth shut when the master's in a mood? The answer, of course, is yes to everything. Even if you've never boiled laundry in your life, and suspect bluing is just what happens to your hands in the cold. Sometimes they check your hands for calluses, inspecting your palms as if they're palm readers specializing in domestic prophecy. Too soft, and they think you're lazy. Too rough, and you must be hiding a criminal past. Or worse, a tendency to unionize. In the background, someone is crying quietly. A girl whose employer decided she didn't fit the household. You make a mental note to always fit the household. Even if it means pretending you love organ meats and can recite every psalm by heart. Sometimes, you spot the rare employer with a kind face, but mostly, they seem to have been carved from the same marble as City Hall. Impressive, intimidating, and likely to complain about the price of soap. There's a strange tension in the air. Each girl hopes to be chosen, but not by the worst families. Not the ones known for broken spirits and broken backs. You share whispered warnings about certain addresses. Avoid the one on Mulberry with the 3 staircases and the angry parrot. Don't work for the lady with the mole. She counts the potatoes. If the family's last name starts with a V, run. When your turn finally comes, you try to look strong but not stubborn, humble but not invisible, grateful but not groveling. It's an audition for a role nobody really wants, but one you need. Mrs. Bernstein calls your name, well, something close to it, and asks if you have references. You hand over a crumpled letter from a priest back home. She squints at the signature, sniffs, and shrugs. "Can you cook?" she asks. "Absolutely," you say. Even if the only thing you've ever cooked is porridge and boiled potatoes, congratulations, you're now a cook. If you're chosen, you leave the line. Heart-pounding, equal parts relief and terror. If not, you get back in line, hoping tomorrow brings better luck. Or at least a family that's more interested in your elbow grease than your accent. But for now, you walk away with a job, a promise of room and board, and the uneasy feeling that you may have just volunteered for the world's most complicated obstacle course. The market empties out. The luckless ones trudging home, the lucky ones hustling off behind new employers, already rehearsing how to say, "Yes, ma'am," with just enough sincerity to get by. Welcome to the Help Wanted ad. The original gig economy, but with more starch, more stairs, and a lot more potatoes. You stand before a matron with a hat bigger than her sense of empathy. She asks if you're strong, honest, and God-fearing. You say, yes, because the correct answer is always yes. She checks your hands for calluses. No calluses means you're either lazy or a criminal mastermind. Let's set the stage. You're standing in the front parlor of someone else's house, shoes squeaking on the polished floor, hands folded just so, and eyes darting between the carpet pattern and the matron's eyebrows, both equally terrifying in their intricacy. The matron sizes you up as if she's about to bid on a prize heifer at the county fair. Her hat, a structure so vast it probably has its own postal code, teeters dangerously as she leans in to inspect your fingernails. You try to remember if you washed them this morning, but honestly, what's one more layer of anxiety at this point? She clears her throat with the kind of authority that could curdle milk. "Do you know how to polish silver?" she asks, like it's a trick question. "Of course," you nod. You have never polished silver in your life, but you've seen a cousin do it once, and you figure it's like washing potatoes, only more judgmental. She follows up with, "Can you make a proper tea?" You nod again, resisting the urge to add, "blindfolded, in a hurricane, while juggling potatoes." But the job market isn't the place for jokes. The questions come rapid fire, each one more loaded than the last. Are you strong enough to carry laundry up 4 flights? Can you keep your head when the children misbehave? Do you understand the importance of never, ever sitting down while on duty? Your answer is always yes. You'd say yes if she asked if you could bake bread underwater. In the job interview, enthusiasm is currency, and you're spending all you've got. Now, the real test. She asks about your moral character. Are you honest, reliable? Will you ever, under any circumstances, steal a candlestick or elope with the milkman? You assure her you are as honest as the day is long, and frankly too tired to elope with anyone. She squints, searching your face for any hint of rebellion or independent thought. You do your best impression of a docile sheep, but inside, you're plotting escape routes in case she asks you to recite scripture from memory. She shifts gears to the verbal abuse portion of the audition. A little test to see how you'll respond to being spoken to like you're both deaf and daft. The last girl, she says, voice dripping with scandal, had opinions. We don't like that here. You nod sympathetically, channeling every ounce of humility you've ever pretended to have. And she was slow with the silver, she adds, as if slow silver polishing is a gateway crime. You assure her. You are quick, efficient, silent, and invisible. She nods, possibly impressed, possibly just winded from the exertion of speaking at length. She asks if you are God-fearing. You are. You assure her. You are also landlady-fearing, landlord-fearing, and, most of all, matron-fearing. She likes this answer. For a moment, she almost smiles, then remembers herself, and resumes her role as head warden of the household. Next, she asks for references. You produce a letter from Father O'Malley, who once saw you sweep a church pew and declared you a model of Christian industry. She doesn't read it. She just checks to see that it exists. Paperwork is less about fact and more about tradition. She tells you what's expected. Up at dawn, bed late, 6.5 days a week, 1 afternoon off per fortnight if the weather is foul and the family is away. The pay? Room, board, and pocket money, which is code for enough to keep you from starving, not enough to encourage you to dream. Finally, she stands, adjusts her hat, and, with the air of someone granting a great favor, announces, "You'll do." Relief washes over you, closely followed by dread, as you realize you've just agreed to spend the foreseeable future polishing silver, scrubbing floors, and nodding through lectures on proper napkin folding. But you're hired. You made it through the gauntlet. Now all you have to do is survive. And as you follow her into the house, already memorizing the pattern of footsteps and the tone of the dinner bell, you can't help but wonder, how hard can it be? Spoiler: harder than you think, but you won't find that out until tomorrow's shift. Congratulations, you got the job. Here's your uniform. A dress so thick it could stop a bullet and a starched cap that doubles as a sweatband. You put it on and instantly age 6 years. Fashion is for people who don't scrub floors. Let's start with the dress itself. A marvel of engineering. If the goal was to create a one-size-fits-none cocoon of misery, the fabric is some mysterious blend of wool, hope, and regret. It reaches from chin to ankle. With sleeves so tight, you briefly consider whether circulation is optional. The color? Practical, which is to say, an indeterminate shade of brown, blue, or black, engineered to hide stains, sadness, and the gradual erosion of your self-esteem. Getting daughter into the uniform is an ordeal in itself. First comes the shift, scratchy, and as forgiving as a bad confession, then the dress, heavy, stiff, and cut for someone with the proportions of a Victorian lamppost. You wriggle, you tug, you contemplate the life choices that led you to this moment. Next up is the apron. Crisp, white, and starched to a level normally reserved for military parades. The apron must be tied perfectly, bows straight, corners flat, or risk a 10-minute scolding about household standards. By the third attempt, your fingers are numb, but your bow is finally symmetrical enough to avoid a lecture. And then, the cap, a masterpiece of social engineering. Its purpose is to keep your hair, and by extension, your dreams, firmly in place. Starched into submission, it pinches at the temples and guarantees a permanent forehead crease. It wobbles with every step, but it is not, under any circumstances, allowed to fall off. If it does, it's evidence of moral collapse. Sometimes, you catch your reflection in a dark window and have to squint to recognize yourself. You look less like a young woman and more like a haunted pastry chef. The whole get-up weighs about as much as a large dog and has the thermal properties of a cast-iron stove. In summer, you marinate in your own sweat, dreaming of ice baths and the sweet release of modern athletic wear. In winter, the wool soaks up every draft and every drop of melted snow, so your bones stay chilled until spring. Flexibility is a foreign concept. Every movement is a negotiation with your own fabric. Try running upstairs in it, and you'll learn why graceful is not on the list of job requirements. But the real kicker is the shoes, leather, unyielding, and seemingly designed by someone with a vendetta against feet. They squeak on linoleum, slip on wet stairs, and develop blisters in places you didn't know you had skin. You break them in, or they break you. Socks, if you're lucky enough to have them, are wool too, coarse and eternally damp. Because nothing in a New York tenement ever dries completely. You learn to move in your uniform, quick enough to avoid the mistress's scowl, quiet enough to escape the notice of the master's guests, and agile enough to dodge the family's dog, who is convinced your apron is a chew toy. You develop a walk that is part tiptoe, part shuffle, part advanced obstacle course, honed by 1,000 close calls with teacups and priceless vases. And yet, for all its discomfort, the uniform is also a kind of shield. It's what lets you blend in, hide the day's worries, and, most importantly, remind yourself and everyone else that you're on the job. Behind the apron, you can grumble in Irish under your breath, roll your eyes where only the wallpaper can see, and carry on through the longest days with at least a sliver of pride. By the end of your first week, you start to understand the hidden wisdom in every itchy fiber and stiff seam. The uniform is armor, and the cap is your badge of survival. You wear them not just because you have to, but because in a city this cold and crowded, sometimes you need 20 pounds of wool just to keep you together. So you straighten your cap, tie your apron, and step back into the fray. Fashionable as a potato sack, but ready for whatever the day and the laundry brings. Your private quarters are technically a closet with a cot, a single hook for your possessions, and a window that looks directly into the neighbor's privy. At least it's your own space, unless the family's dog gets lonely at night. Let's set the scene. After a day spent scrubbing, hauling, and dodging both criticism and airborne potatoes, you finally retreat to your room. Calling it a room is generous. It's more of a rectangular suggestion, a glorified cupboard squeezed between the kitchen and the back stairs. The door doesn't lock, for your own safety, they say, and it creaks loud enough to wake the entire household, except, apparently, the one person you need to stay asleep. The cot is a marvel of minimalist design, by which I mean it's slightly softer than the floor and exactly as squeaky. You lie on it at night, listening to the city hum, and the bed springs threaten collapse every time you exhale. The pillow is flat as a pancake, and smells faintly of mothballs, lye, and disappointment. Your blanket, if you can call it that, was once white but now hovers in the mysterious grey zone between laundered and retired as a cleaning rag. There's a draft that sneaks in through the window, which never quite shuts, ensuring that you get the full sensory experience of New York's finest winter chills and, on especially lucky evenings, a whiff of what the neighbour had for dinner, or, less charmingly, for lunch. Storage is an exercise in vertical Tetris. The single hook on the wall must hold your coat, your apron, your Sunday dress, and, if you're feeling daring, the one sentimental keepsake you dared to bring across the Atlantic. Anything else you own, shoes, a tattered book, the money you're hoarding for your little brother's passage, lives tucked beneath the cot, wrapped in a scarf and guarded by the ever-vigilant dust bunnies. Privacy here is measured in seconds, not minutes. There's always a reason for someone to burst in, laundry to collect, a child on the run from bath time, or the dog, convinced your room is a luxury kennel. Sometimes, if the family is hosting guests, you'll return to find a strange hat tossed onto your bed, or a half-eaten sandwich sitting on your only clean plate. Boundaries are a theory, not a practice. But for all its flaws, this closet corner cubby is yours. When the house finally goes quiet and the gas lights flicker low, you can at last exhale and let your mind wander. Maybe you reread a letter from home, or whisper a prayer for good luck and unblistered hands. Sometimes you press your forehead to the glass, staring out at the neighbour privy and dreaming of the green fields of Kerry or the salty air of Galway Bay. You'd trade it all for a window with a view. But for now, this slice of the city is home. You decorate in the only way you can. A pressed flower hidden between Bible pages, a faded photo tucked into the mirror's frame, a bit of lace crocheted during stolen moments of peace. These tiny tokens remind you of your real self, the person you are when the apron comes off, when you're not the help, but a daughter, a sister, a storyteller, a dreamer. And in this room you are off duty. You can mutter complaints about the master's muddy boots, roll your eyes at the lady's endless demands, or, when you're sure nobody's listening, sing a tune your mother taught you. Sleep comes in fits and starts, often interrupted by clattering pipes, or the sudden appearance of the family's terrier, who has never respected a closed door. But eventually, exhaustion wins out. You drift into uneasy dreams, grateful for a roof and four walls, even if two are borrowed from the pantry. In the morning, you rise before dawn, dressing quietly so as not to wake the house. You take one last deep breath in your room, your own space, however humble, and prepare to step back into the role that waits on the other side of the door. A closet with a cot may not be the palace you imagined when you boarded the ship, but for tonight, it's enough. Sometimes, enough is the bravest thing you can have. Your day starts before the sun, and your first task is to light the stove without blowing up the kitchen. If the porridge isn't perfect, prepare for a lecture about standards from someone who can't boil an egg. Let's set the alarm. It's barely 4:30. The sky outside your tiny window is still ink, black, and every muscle in your body is pleading for 5 more minutes of sleep. But duty, like the city, never sleeps. You shuffle into the kitchen in your sturdy boots and scratchy wool dress, trying not to trip over the family dog, already lurking in hopes of dropped scraps, or the cat, who's plotting world domination from atop the flour bin. Lighting the stove is a daily gamble. You strike a match, pray you don't set your sleeve on fire, and coax the stubborn flame to life. Coal dust fills the air and clings to your skin, so even before you've opened a single cupboard, you already look like you've lost a bare-knuckle fight with a chimney sweep. The stove hisses and pops, adding a new dimension to your ongoing anxiety about unexpected explosions. Breakfast is a well-choreographed panic. The master and mistress expect a proper spread, porridge simmered to the exact consistency of mortar, eggs boiled precisely 4 minutes, not 3, not 5, and toast that is golden brown without a single burnt edge. The coffee must be strong enough to wake the dead, but not so bitter that it offends the lady's delicate sensibilities. No pressure. You measure out oats, add a pinch of salt, and stir the pot like your life depends on it. In a way, it does. A lumpy porridge earns you an eyebrow raise. A thin porridge, a dramatic sigh. And heaven help you if you ever forget the sugar. There's an entire subcategory of lectures for that. Meanwhile, you juggle slicing bread, beating eggs, and peeling oranges, moving faster than you ever have in your life, all before you've even had so much as a sip of tea yourself. Then come the interruptions. The youngest child wanders in, wailing for jam on his bread. The dog snatches a sausage and vanishes under the table. The milk boils over, the kettle whistles, and the mistress chooses this exact moment to appear in the doorway, silk robe floating, and eyebrows already halfway to the ceiling. "Is breakfast ready?" she asks, as if she's been awake and helpful for hours. You smile and nod, resisting the urge to mention that she thought the stove worked by magic until last week. As the family gathers, the dining room transforms into a theatre of demands. Dishes are sent back for being too cold, too hot, too much, or too little. You keep count, just for fun, of how many times the word unacceptable gets thrown your way before 7 a.m. If you survive the gauntlet of breakfast, you might reward yourself with a hasty crust of bread, eaten while standing in the pantry. This is your me time, 20 seconds of peace, accompanied by the faint hope that no one will come looking for the gravy boat. The kitchen itself is a war zone. Grease pops on the stove, pots clang, and crumbs multiply faster than rumors at Sunday Mass. Clean as you go, you were told. But the only thing multiplying faster than the mess is the family's collective appetite. No matter how much food you serve, someone will complain that it isn't as good as the breakfasts we had in Paris, even though you're fairly sure the closest they've been to Paris is reading about it in a borrowed travel guide. Sometimes, if the morning's chaos aligns with a rare act of mercy from the breakfast gods, you get a mumbled thank you or, at the very least, a moment without criticism. More often, you get to enjoy the lingering aroma of burnt toast and the knowledge that, no matter how hard you try, breakfast will never be perfect. Perfection, it turns out, is a moving target, usually one with jam on its face and a sticky hand grabbing for your skirt. As the sun finally rises and the kitchen settles into the lull between meals, you breathe out, mop your brow, and prepare for the next round. Because in this house, breakfast isn't just the most important meal of the day, it's the opening act in a marathon of impossible expectations. And somehow, you always find the strength to do it all again tomorrow. Monday is laundry day, which means hauling boiling water up 2 flights of stairs, scrubbing mysterious stains out of unmentionables, and somehow managing not to poison yourself with lye. Your hands are now 60% blisters and 40% soap residue. Let's start with the worst part, the water. In theory, hot water should be your friend, soothing, cleansing, restorative. In practice, it's heavy, scalding, and completely uninterested in helping you achieve any of those things. Before dawn, you fill pails at the kitchen stove, trying not to spill boiling water on your feet as you slosh your way up the narrow, slippery back stairs. You will do this journey at least 4 times, building muscles in your arms and a burning resentment in your soul. The laundry room is barely bigger than a closet and twice as humid. Steam fills the air, turning your hair into a frizzy halo and fogging your only mirror. There's a wash tub, a scrubbing board, a battered bar of lye soap, and a sense of impending doom. The process is simple. You soak, You scrub, you rinse, you repeat until your wrists ache and your back mutters threats of mutiny. Each shirt, sock, and petticoat is a new adventure in Guess the Stain, featuring all your favorite mystery substances from Just Gravy. I hope to. Why is this green and crunchy? Lie. Your main cleaning agent is also your main nemesis. The label says caution, but what it really means is good luck and Godspeed. It burns your hands, your nose, and sometimes your dignity when you inevitably get it on your apron and leave behind a ghostly white handprint. You scrub at stains with a ferocity that surprises even you, cursing quietly when the dirt wins and pretending not to notice when the water turns an alarming shade of brown. It's a full-body workout, with none of the glamour and all of the accidental chemical burns. Unmentionables, stockings, bloomers, those undergarments too delicate or too embarrassing for daylight, are somehow always the most challenging. The lady of the house expects them to be as white as the driven snow, even if the only snow you see in New York is a sort of grey slush. You wield your washboard like a knight with a lance, trying to scrub away stains and shame, knowing you'll never quite succeed. If you finish and the lace is still attached, it's a small miracle. Rinsing is a race against the clock. You haul more clean water, wring out each piece with numb fingers, and try to ignore the fact that your fingernails have gone wrinkly and raw. Everything gets wrung out and then lugged to the backyard or rooftop to dry. In summer, the lines are already crowded with other tenants washing. In winter, you hang sheets and shirts only to bring them in hours later, frozen solid and twice as heavy. Frozen laundry is a uniquely American nightmare. Just ask your knuckles. The final act of laundry day is the ironing. The iron itself weighs about as much as a healthy sheep and must be heated on the stove, then wielded quickly before it cools down or, worse, scorches the best tablecloth. You flatten wrinkles with a vengeance, all while dodging the cat, who believes that every fresh sheet is an invitation to shed fur in new and creative patterns. As the afternoon wears on, the house fills with the not unpleasant smell of soap, steam, and defeat. Your hands are red and swollen, your apron is damp, your back is howling, and your sense of accomplishment is offset only by the certainty that by next Monday, every garment will be dirtier than before, and the cycle will start again. If you're lucky, you might get a cup of tea and a moment to sit on the back stoop, letting the sun dry your hair and the breeze cool your arms. But mostly, you just get blisters, a faint chemical buzz in your nostrils, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, for one shining moment, everyone in the house has something clean to wear, thanks to you, the unsung hero of laundry day. And so, as the last shirt flaps in the wind and you wipe your hands on your battered skirt, you allow yourself a small smile. In a world where so much is out of your control, at least you can conquer a pile of dirty socks. That, and possibly start a hand modeling career for before pictures. No matter how hard you work, the city's dust finds a way in. You sweep, mop, dust, and polish until you start hallucinating dust bunnies in your sleep. The lady of the house invents new surfaces for you to clean out of sheer spite. Let's get you into character. You're armed with a mop, a bucket, a rag, and a broom that's been used so many times it has the receding hairline of a stressed-out accountant. From the moment you finish breakfast, yours consisting mostly of crusts and whatever didn't hit the floor, you launch yourself into the daily war on grime. Manhattan, it turns out, is mostly just coal dust and dreams. And every breeze brings a fresh layer into the grandest brownstone. The city seems determined to remind you that for every spot you scrub away, 2 more will appear, like hydra heads, but with more lint. You begin in the parlor, a room reserved for guests and the family's collection of priceless knickknacks. Each one, you're informed, must be dusted with a separate cloth. The piano gets a soft rag, the marble statuette a chamois, and the porcelain dog, which you're convinced is glaring at you, gets only your most gentle touch. One sneeze and you're a legend for all the wrong reasons. If you're lucky, you'll only knock over a picture frame. If you're unlucky, you'll set off a domino effect involving a vase, a clock, and your immediate unemployment. Next, you tackle the floors, wooden, creaky, and designed, apparently to collect every particle of city filth. You sweep, you mop, and then you sweep again, because dust has the supernatural ability to reappear the second your back is turned. Sometimes, the lady of the house appears, inspecting your progress with the precision of a museum curator and the empathy of a tax auditor. "You missed a spot," she says, pointing to a speck of dust smaller than her patience. You thank her, because sarcasm is forbidden, and attack the spot like you're exorcising a demon. Every surface is fair game: banisters, baseboards, windowsills, and, if you're truly unfortunate, the chandelier, which requires balancing on a rickety ladder while wielding a feather duster and muttering prayers to every saint you can remember. If you're terrified of heights, congratulations, so is the chandelier. You spend half your time praying you don't plummet onto the master's new carpet, which, according to legend, was imported from somewhere more expensive than Ireland. The kitchen is another story. Soot, flour, grease, and a mysterious substance you're fairly sure is alive. The stove must be scoured until it gleams, the copper pots shined until you can see your own exhausted reflection, and the pantry shelves wiped free of any evidence that mice have outwitted every trap ever set. The lady of the house, who has never cooked a meal herself, will deliver running commentary from the doorway. The silver isn't bright enough. Did you dust behind the clock? Are you sure you're using enough elbow grease? You are, in fact, running dangerously low on elbows. Bathrooms and bedrooms each present their own nightmares. Bathrooms mean scrubbing tiles and scouring sinks until you've bleached the memory out of them. Bedrooms require making beds with hospital corners so sharp you could use them for surgery, fluffing pillows, and folding nightgowns with geometric precision. There is always an extra sheet to iron or a secret drawer to organize. If you finish early, don't relax. New tasks materialize out of thin air. Some days you suspect the family stays up at night inventing new places to store dust. The final indignity? You're never really done. Just as you step back to admire your work, a muddy bootprint appears in the hall, or the wind rattles open a window, scattering a fresh coat of city dust like confetti at a parade you were never invited to. The day's work is relentless, and so is the dirt. But you endure. You take pride in the shine, in the pride, brief moments when a room is spotless, even if it lasts only until the next breeze. You move quietly through the house, the ghost of cleanliness, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone will notice all you've done, or at the very least, not drop a biscuit on the floor for 5 whole minutes. And so, with aching arms and a new appreciation for every clean corner, you hang up your mop at day's end, knowing that tomorrow the dirt will be back, but so will you. Dirt never sleeps, but neither do you, not really. You're just waiting for the next battle. The house has rules, and you are at the bottom of every list. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't sit unless you're invisible. If you break a plate, you're not just clumsy, you're a disgrace to your entire ancestry. Let's walk through your day, one rule at a time. Before you even blink awake, the rules are waiting for you, lurking in every polished corner and starched napkin. There's a list in the kitchen, posted just above the broom closet for maximum intimidation, but you barely need to read it. The rules live rent-free in your head, whispered by the mistress and reinforced by the silent, watchful portraits of ancestors who seem to judge you from their gilded frames. Rule 1. Don't speak unless spoken to. This isn't just polite advice, it's survival. The less you say, the fewer chances you have to say the wrong thing. You become a master of the silent nod, the deferential smile, the raised eyebrow that says, "Yes, ma'am," even when what you mean is, "I haven't slept since the Taft administration." Conversations in the house swirl around you like gusts of wind. You know everyone's secrets, the uncle's gambling, the daughter's love letters, the master's hidden stash of brandy, but you never, ever let on. Your poker face is better than a professional card sharp. Rule 2. Don't sit unless you're invisible. Chairs, you learn, are a luxury reserved for people whose last names are on NDE, the mailbox. Your feet throb, your back aches. But if the mistress walks in and sees you perched on a kitchen stool, even for a moment, prepare for a lecture on the slippery slope of laziness and a reminder that idleness is the mother of sin. There's a whole theology around sitting, apparently, and none of it is in your favor. You become an expert at resting while standing, leaning subtly against a counter, shifting your weight from one foot to the other, perfecting the art of the 5-second sit and jump up routine. Rule 3. Don't smile, at least not too much. Smiling is suspicious. Too little, and you're accused of sulking or bad spirits. Too much, and you must be up to something. You practice the Goldilocks smile. Not too warm, not too cold, just bland enough to melt into the wallpaper. Laughter is reserved for the family, or the guests, or the lady's friends, who all seem to find the help endlessly amusing, especially when they're not paying attention to what you're actually doing. And then there's the grand tradition of blame. Break a plate? It's not just an accident, it's a reflection of your national character, your upbringing, and possibly the weather in County Mayo. The family gathers to witness the evidence, a shard of porcelain held up like a murder weapon. You apologize, promise to do better, and vow to practice handling dishes in your sleep. The other staff give you the silent, knowing look that says, "We've all been there," before quietly praying you won't be next. The rules are everywhere and nowhere, shifting depending on the family's mood, the day's news, or the number of guests in the house. Some days, you're expected to be invisible. Other days, you're trotted out as proof of the family's benevolence. "We treat our staff like family," they say, right before reminding you that family doesn't eat at the same table. You learn to anticipate the rules before they're spoken. You memorize every household quirk. The master likes his coffee strong, his slippers by the fire, and absolute silence during his afternoon nap. The lady of the house despises the sound of cutlery scraping plates, the sight of dust on windowsills, and, most of all, the word no. You learn to read a room, to sense when a rule is about to be enforced, to dodge trouble with the agility of a cat in a rocking chair factory. In the quiet moments, when the house is still and the only sound is your own heart beating, you sometimes wonder what it would be like to live without so many rules, to speak freely, to sit for as long as you wanted, to laugh without worrying who's listening. But for now, you keep moving, keep quiet, and keep the rules close. Because in this house, the greatest crime isn't breaking the china, it's breaking the code. And if you want to keep your job, you learn to follow the rules. Even as you quietly dream of the day you'll write a few of your own. You love the kids, most days. On other days, you consider running away with the circus. They demand stories, rides, and emotional labor, all while throwing food at your freshly mopped floor. The baby bites. Let's talk about your actual job description, because, as every Irish maid soon discovers, Other duties as assigned is less a guideline and more a lifestyle. Children are both your greatest joy and your greatest challenge. Small bundles of boundless energy who can turn any calm moment into a festival of chaos. You start the day with the best intentions, songs, smiles, and a game or two, and end it clutching your sanity like it's the last biscuit in the tin. Mornings are the sweetest, if you're lucky. Bleary-eyed little ones tumble into the kitchen still warm from sleep, with hair like haystacks and faces sticky with yesterday's jam. They climb into your lap, demand a story, or insist you become a horse galloping up and down the hallway. You oblige, because sometimes their laughter is the best sound in a city full of honking cabs and shouting street vendors. There are moments, quiet, secret moments, when you remember your own little brothers and sisters in Ireland. And for a second, the distance doesn't feel quite so impossible, but the sweetness is fleeting. Breakfast launches a daily battle. Porridge in the hair, toast on the floor, and orange juice launched with the accuracy of a circus knife thrower. As you bend to wipe up the latest disaster, you're guaranteed to be stepped on, climbed over, or tackled by a toddler with a suspiciously sticky handshake. The lady of the house enters just in time to see the mess and offers her trademark sigh of disappointment, as if you somehow encouraged the child to butter the cat. Midday is when the real fun begins. There's the toddler, who wants nothing more than to play with the family silverware and eat crayons. The 6-year-old, an aspiring magician, tries to make your apron disappear while you're still wearing it. The eldest child asks endless questions about everything from how stoves work to whether you ever met a leprechaun back in the old country. You learn to invent answers that sound magical and just vague enough to satisfy, all while untangling hair ribbons and rescuing dolls from the dog's jaws. Emotional labor? You've got it in spades. You're the secret confidant for lonely children, the referee of sibling disputes, and the one person guaranteed to remember where every toy was last seen. You dry tears, kiss scraped knees, and offer encouragement for piano practice that could make a grown man weep. You're also the designated monster chaser, banishing imaginary beasts from closets and under beds with the bravado of a professional exorcist. And then there's the baby, the tiniest tyrant of them all. Small, deceptively innocent, but armed with the world's sharpest gums. The baby bites, and you have the bruises to prove it. The family finds it adorable, you less so. Diapers, bottles, and lullabies on repeat, until your eyes cross and your arms ache. Sleep? Only if the baby sleeps first. And that's a wager no one in the house is betting on. Of course, as every seasoned maid knows, children are excellent at sabotage. Just when the floor is clean, they track in half the garden. Just as you finish folding the laundry, they host a puppet show with the pillowcases. You mop, you scold, you laugh, and sometimes you just sigh and join in, because resistance is futile and joy is rare. Still, when bedtime finally comes and you tuck the last child in, you get a thank you whispered through a yawn, or a sticky hug, or the warm weight of a small hand reaching for yours in the dark. In those moments, you remember why you do it. Not just for the money, not just for the hope of a better future, but for the wild, exhausting, utterly human comfort of being needed. So yes, children can be blessings, miniature tyrants, and everything in between. And if you ever do run away to join the circus, you'll be the star, because after managing this crew, nothing under the big top could surprise you. Cooking is an art form, but only if you consider burning the oatmeal modernist cuisine. You discover 37 ways to cook potatoes. The family is still unimpressed. Let's step into your new domain, the kitchen. It's the heart of the home, or more accurately, the overheated appendix, cramped, cluttered, and in a constant state of high-stakes panic. Here, You're expected to whip up 3 meals a day for a family who treats food as both fuel and theatre. Every meal is a performance. And you, unfortunately, are the headlining act, with a supporting cast of mismatched pots, unpredictable ovens, and a temperamental range that hisses like an angry cat. You begin your culinary day by wrestling with the stove, which alternates between roaring inferno and sullen cold, never pausing at medium. Lighting it is a daily test of courage. The oven, meanwhile, is a mystery box, with a mind of its own, sometimes baking bread to golden perfection, sometimes charring biscuits into objects suitable for self-defense. There's no temperature gauge, only the family's withering gaze, and the subtle art of guess and pray cookery. Your ingredients, such as they are, arrive with the morning's market delivery and the kitchen budget, which is just enough to keep the family fed, but never enough to impress. Meat is a Sunday luxury. Most days, you're working with potatoes, onions, carrots, and whatever vegetables survived the journey from the grocer's cart to your battered countertop. You master the art of stretching a single chicken across 3 meals and 4 suspiciously large leftover soups. If you've never made potato pie, potato pudding, or potato surprise, don't worry, you will. Recipes exist, but only in the heads of ladies who never actually cook. The mistress insists on French cuisine after her one trip to Paris, but she means add more butter and pretend it's fancy. You try your hand at soufflé, only to discover that the house is full of unexpected drafts and loud noises, both of which seem designed to make anything delicate collapse like your dreams of culinary greatness. The family's favorite dish, you eventually learn, is anything you didn't burn. High praise. Breakfast is chaos, lunch is carnage, and dinner is theatre. The children demand pancakes, shaped like animals. The master wants his steak just so. And the lady of the house has discovered a new dietary philosophy every Tuesday. You juggle requests, fend off the dog, who is an expert at stealing bacon, and try to keep the cat out of the cream. Timing is everything. There are days when you wish you had 4 hands and 2 extra hours. And then there are the disasters. The gravy curdles, the pudding collapses, or, worst of all, you accidentally serve yesterday's soup for the 3rd time in a week. You brace for criticism, invent creative excuses. It's a family recipe from the old country, and pray that dessert distracts everyone from the undercooked carrots. If all else fails, you lean on Irish staples, soda bread, potato cakes, stews thick enough to stand a spoon in. They may not impress, but at least no one can claim they're hungry. Cleanup is a sport unto itself. Dishes pile up faster than you can wash them, and the sink is always just one clump of potato peelings away from rebellion. Hot water is a luxury, soap is precious, and your hands are in a perpetual state of prune. And just as you finish, someone will inevitably wander in asking for a snack, undoing all your hard work with a single, "Is there anything to eat?" Still, for all its chaos, the kitchen is sometimes your sanctuary. When the house is quiet and the last crumbs are swept away, you might sneak a corner of fresh bread or sip a cup of tea by the stove, letting the warmth chase away the day's exhaustion. You think of home, of your mother's kitchen, the smell of peat smoke, the taste of stew cooked, slow and with love. Maybe tomorrow, you'll finally get the soufflé to rise. Or maybe you'll just invent the 38th way to cook potatoes. But whatever happens, you'll be back in the kitchen at dawn. Because in this house, the next meal is always coming. And the only thing more relentless than hunger is hope. Served hot, with a side of blisters and a dash of stubborn pride, you finally get paid, only to find that half your wages have been deducted for breakages, laundry soap, and using too much lamp oil. The other half goes home to your family in Ireland, if you're lucky. Payday Two words that should inspire excitement. But for you, it's mostly an exercise in advanced arithmetic and mild heartbreak. On the last Saturday of the month, you line up outside the study, smoothing your apron, rehearsing your politest thank you, and quietly bracing for disappointment. The master sits at his desk, spectacles perched on his nose, a stack of envelopes at his elbow and a ledger as thick as a family Bible. When it's your turn, he barely looks up. "Here you are," he says, handing over a sealed envelope with your name spelled wrong in two places. You offer a smile and step away, heart fluttering. For a brief, shining second, you imagine the possibilities. A new pair of stockings, a tin of sweets, maybe even a trip to the picture show. Then you open the envelope. Inside is your pay, a handful of coins, a paper note, and a laundry list, sometimes literally, of deductions. 2 saucers chipped, lye soap for laundry, coal for extra fire in the nursery, lamp oil for reading after dark. You blink, trying to remember the sources in question, and debate whether reading a borrowed book by candlelight is truly an extravagance. There's always a new charge, some tiny infraction or household expense that magically lands in your column. If you ever complain, you're reminded that room and board is itself a great kindness. And you should be grateful you're not on the streets, like so many these days. You count and recount your wages, willing the coins to multiply. Sometimes you wonder if there's a secret game where the less you spend, the more creative the deductions become. The only thing you know for certain is that the pile is smaller than you hoped, barely enough for your own needs and certainly not enough for any luxuries. Still, you steel yourself for the real task, sending money home. That, at least, is non-negotiable. Every month, you queue at the Western Union office with a handful of other maids, clutching envelopes addressed to towns and villages scattered across Ireland. It's a line of determined faces, some hopeful, some exhausted, all united by duty. You hand over your hard-earned cash, sign the receipt, and say a silent prayer that the money gets there safely. For a moment, you feel a surge of pride. No matter how little you have, you're helping to keep your family afloat across an ocean and a world away. Of course, that leaves precious little for yourself. After the remittance, you stretch the remainder with the expertise of a magician. A new ribbon for Sunday Mass, a penny for a sweet, maybe a tiny gift for a friend's birthday. The rest disappears into the invisible ledger of laundry soap, replacement hairpins, and the occasional emergency cup of tea at the kitchen table. There's no holiday bonus, no raise, no thanks for scrubbing the floors until your knuckles bled. If you're lucky, the mistress might offer you a cast-off dress, altered so many times it fits no one and flatters nothing. If you're very lucky, you might get Sunday afternoon off, provided you've finished the ironing and the family's dog hasn't had a nervous breakdown. But even when the envelope feels lighter than your hopes, you remind yourself why you do it. You picture your family at home, your mother opening your letter, your little brother running to the shop with coins clutched in his fist, your father raising a glass to your health. Your sacrifice is invisible, your struggles silent, but it matters. So payday is never just about money, it's a reckoning, a reminder of what you're working for and why you can't quit, even when you want to. And as you slip your coins into their hiding place and straighten your apron for the next day, you tell yourself, quietly, stubbornly, that you'll keep going. Because hope, like wages, always seems to go farther when you send it home. Supposedly you have a day off every week. In reality, you spend it mending clothes, writing desperate letters home, and dodging strange men in the park. Freedom tastes a lot like yesterday's bread. Let's paint the scene. It's Sunday. The clock barely struck 8, and the house is, for once, quiet. In theory, this is your time. The family is at church or sleeping in, and you are free to do, well, anything you please. But as you gaze around your tiny closet room at the pile of socks needing darning and the skirt with an ever-widening tear, reality sets in. Your day off has arrived, and it has brought chores of its own. Act 1. Mending and making do. You settle in by the window, squinting in the half-light as you thread your needle for the 5th time. Socks, aprons, handkerchiefs. Every garment has a story, most of them involving mud, torn seams, and children with an uncanny sense for disaster. You patch and stitch, your fingers moving with the muscle memory of 100 Sunday mornings. Sometimes, you even mend something for yourself. A luxury. You daydream about dresses in shop windows. But in reality, your wardrobe consists of what you can repair, rescue, or inherit from the mistress's ever-rotating closet. Act 2. Letters home and the art of omission. After mending, you sit down to write home. The letter is a balancing act. Enough optimism to keep Mam's spirits up. Enough truth to let her know you're alive, but not so much that she worries. All is well here, Ma'am, you write, skimming lightly over the blisters and the late nights, focusing instead on small victories. The bread turned out soft. The child finally learned her sums. The mistress only scolded you twice this week. You tuck in a pressed clover or a scrap of lace, a tiny reminder of care across an ocean. Sometimes, the act of writing makes you feel lighter, like sending your worries to sea in a bottle. Act 3. A taste of the outside world. By noon, you've done as much mending and letter writing as humanly possible, and you escape the house, clutching your hard-earned freedom. The city outside is a roaring symphony, streetcars rattling, vendors hawking, a breeze that tastes faintly of brine and bakery smoke. You might wander to the park, careful to avoid the benches where the local bachelors gather like pigeons, eyeing every passing maid with the subtlety of a marching band. Sometimes, you walk with friends from the old country, swapping gossip and tips for avoiding unwanted attention and finding the best spots for a cheap cup of tea. Your shoes pinch, and the sky is always a little too bright. But there's magic in the freedom, even if it's just for an afternoon. You watch children playing, women arm in arm, young men tipping hats, some charming, some decidedly not. You might buy a crust of bread or a tart if there's anything left from payday, and eat it in the sun, savoring the quiet moment of being just another girl in New York. You pretend not to notice the crumbs on your skirt or the man on the bench who looks like he might start a conversation about your lovely red hair. You move along. Safety, after all, is always a consideration, even on your day off. But just as you start to lose yourself in the city, the bells from the church ring out, a subtle reminder that the family will return soon. You hurry home, cheeks flushed from sun and stolen happiness, pockets empty, heart just a little bit fuller. As you let yourself back in through the side door, you return to your closet, your duties, your world. Maybe you managed an hour or two that was truly yours, or maybe the whole day was a series of errands for everyone but yourself. Either way, you tuck the memory away like a coin, proof that freedom, no matter how fleeting, is worth savoring, even if it tastes a little like yesterday's bread. Your pay is pitiful, but your sense of obligation is titanic. You queue up at the telegraph office, carefully wrap your coins, and send them back to keep your little brother in shoes and your mother in prayers. Let's set the mood. It's your one free evening of the month, and instead of lounging in the park or splurging on a scoop of vanilla ice cream, you're standing in line at the Western Union office. The queue snakes out the door, a procession of tired faces from a dozen countries, each clutching a battered envelope or a purse with more hope than actual coins inside. The man behind the window looks like he's been counting money since the dawn of time and is determined never to crack a smile. You clutch your precious coins, feeling both proud and a little heartsick. This, more than anything, is the invisible work of every immigrant maid. The actual job is backbreaking, scrubbing, washing, wrangling children and stains. But it's nothing compared to the weight of knowing there's a family depending on you an ocean away. Your wages, already whittled down by deductions for lamp oil, chipped saucers, and misplaced handkerchiefs, shrink even further as you set aside the largest share for home. Shoes for your brother, medicine for your grandmother, a bit for mom to keep the roof patched and the kettle on. It's a strange kind of arithmetic, subtracting your own needs so others can survive. That new pair of gloves you eyed in the shop window? Not this month. The trip to the music hall with your friend Bridget? Maybe next spring. Even the smallest luxuries, a ribbon for your hair, a sweet bun from the bakery, are measured against the memory of muddy boots back home. The sound of your mother's voice reading your letter by candlelight. The guilt, at times, is enormous. The sense that if you just worked harder, saved more, pinched tighter, you could solve every problem with a few more coins. Inside the telegraph office, the floorboards creak and the air is thick with the scent of ink and worry. Conversations float around you. Snatches of Italian, Polish, Yiddish, Gaelic, each voice with its own stories of sacrifice and hope. Some are here for the first time, learning how to fill out the transfer slip. Others are veterans, knowing exactly how much to send and how to stretch what's left. You find comfort in this chorus of longing, proof that you're not alone, even as you do the loneliest thing in the world. When your turn comes, you press your coins through the window. Heart pounding. The clerk counts them, scribbles in a ledger, and hands you a flimsy receipt. You sign your name, sometimes your real one, sometimes the Americanized version the Ellis Island officer gifted you, and pray that the money arrives safely, that the postman finds your family before the rent collector does. On the walk home, you let yourself imagine their faces. Your little brother racing down the lane, new boots thudding in the mud. Your mother, eyes shining with pride and relief. For a moment, you let yourself feel lighter. You did something real. You made a difference. Of course, practicality returns before you even reach your street. There's still soap to buy, rent to pay, the endless string of little emergencies and unexpected expenses that come with life in a city that seems designed to squeeze every penny from your pocket. Sometimes you resent it. The sacrifice, the constant calculation. Other times, you remember how lucky you are to have something to send, however small. Back in your room, you tuck the receipt into a battered envelope with your letters home. Sometimes you add a pressed clover, a snippet of ribbon, a prayer on a torn scrap of paper. You may not have much, but you have hope. A currency that, while not redeemable at Western Union, is somehow more valuable than all the dollars in the world. So you keep sending money home. Month after month, quietly heroic, quietly homesick. The queue at Western Union never gets shorter, the sacrifice never gets easier, but you do it anyway. Because love, after all, is a debt you never finish paying. Gossip is the only thing that travels faster than typhoid. You hear about someone who married a policeman. You consider it for 5 seconds. Then remember you haven't had a real conversation with a man since landing in America. Let's pull back the curtain on your social life, such as it is. Between dawn shifts and back-breaking chores, you'd think there'd be no time for drama. But in reality, the world of Irish maids is a swirling soup of rumours, whispered hopes, and the occasional scandal that keeps everyone both entertained and on their toes. Word travels through tenement hallways and over shared laundry lines, picking up speed with every telling, growing more colorful with each retelling, like a game of telephone, but with more suspicion and better hair advice. It starts in the kitchen, with whispers traded over the scouring of pots. Did you hear about Nora on Mulberry? Caught kissing a butcher's boy behind the fish market. Suddenly, everyone's slicing potatoes with renewed interest. A week later, the butcher's boy is yesterday's news, replaced by the even juicier story of a girl who found her way into the good graces and the guest room of a wealthy widow uptown. Was it her cleaning skills? Or her ability to charm with an accent thicker than pea soup? No one knows. But everyone speculates. Romance, of course, is the star of most rumors. There's endless talk of courtships that never quite materialize. Maids and delivery boys making eyes over baskets of bread. Secret meetings in crowded parks, or long walks after church on Sundays. There's always someone who claims to know someone who's secretly engaged. You pretend not to care, but even you can't help listening a little closer when the talk turns to love. A policeman marries a maid and suddenly, the whole block is abuzz. Is he handsome? Does he drink? Is she the lucky one? Or is she simply doomed to wash uniforms instead of table linens? You might daydream about romance yourself, just for a minute, between scrubbing floors and setting tables. But real conversation with men is as rare as an actual day off. Most days, your social circle is strictly female. Fellow maids from every county in Ireland, a few Germans with a love of strong coffee, and one indomitable Italian who insists on teaching everyone to make perfect pasta. Rivalries form as easily as friendships. There's always one girl who's the fastest with the iron, the best at mending, or rumored to have caught the eye of the master's eldest son. You can't help but compare. Her hair is shinier, her hands are smoother, her apron always just a touch whiter. Of course, rivalry is rarely mean-spirited, at least not for long. Most days, the competition is just for fun, or a way to keep spirits up when the chores drag on and the hours feel endless. Still, when the gossip turns your way, it can sting. Someone saw you walking with the grocer's assistant? Expect questions. Did you get a letter from home and smile just a little too widely? Someone will ask if it's a love letter, even if it's just ma'am reminding you to say your prayers. And yet, beneath all the chatter, there's camaraderie. When one girl lands a better job or wins a beau, there are whispers of envy. Sure, but also genuine cheers, because everyone is fighting the same battle, just in different uniforms. It's the gossip and laughter, the shared secrets and sly winks that make the days bearable and the nights less lonely. The kitchen might be full of potato peels and dishwater, but it's also where friendships simmer, alliances form, and dreams are whispered over mugs of weak tea. Romance, rivalry, rumor. They all help you remember there's more to life than scrubbing and saving. Maybe you will marry a policeman, or maybe you'll just get a real conversation with someone, anyone, who doesn't expect you to do the dishes afterward. Either way, it's hope and human connection that keep you coming back to the crowded, chattering heart of the maid's world. And as you pass on the latest juicy tidbit, you know that tomorrow, you'll have a brand new story to share. You thought you'd miss the green hills of Ireland, but mostly you just miss not being cold all the time. Snow in New York is beautiful until it mixes with horse manure. Let's get honest. Homesickness isn't just a feeling, it's a permanent background hum, like a song stuck in your head that gets louder every time you catch a whiff of someone baking soda bread or hear a voice calling out a name you haven't heard since your last ferry out of Cork. You thought you'd pine for the rolling green fields and endless drizzle, the sound of your father's boots on the flagstones, or the way your mother could silence a room with a single look. And yes, you do. But what you didn't expect was how much you'd miss the little things. The taste of good butter, the sight of chickens pecking in the yard, or falling asleep to the steady rhythm of rain on a leaky roof instead of the city's endless symphony of honking, shouting, and streetcars screeching round the bend. New York weather is an education in disappointment. When winter comes, it doesn't sneak up on you with a gentle frost. It slaps you across the face, howling through your threadbare coat, sneaking under doors, and freezing your breath before you've even left your lumpy cot. At first, you marvel at the snow, watching flakes drift past your window and coat the city in a brief, shining blanket of white. For a glorious hour, it's as if the whole world has gone quiet. The city's sharp edges softened under a layer of magic. Then reality returns. Snowplows, if they exist at all, are mostly wishful thinking. And within a day, the streets are full of slush, the color of weak tea, laced with horse droppings and the unidentifiable ooze of urban optimism melting away. Your boots, never designed for snow, soak through by breakfast. The wet seeps into your bones, and no amount of tea or extra socks can coax out the chill. You remember huddling by the fire at home, the room filled with laughter and the sharp, comforting scent of peat smoke. In New York, you huddle near a sputtering stove in the kitchen, surrounded by clattering pots and the faint but ever-present aroma of boiled onions. You discover that you even miss the rain. Real rain. Irish rain. The kind that fell sideways and soaked you through but felt like a blessing after a long, dry spell. Here, rain comes in sudden, angry bursts, mixing with soot, flooding the gutters and making the city smell even stranger than usual. It's not the same. The sound on the rooftops is wrong, the air heavy with something foreign, and for a moment you close your eyes and pretend you're back in the old country. Homesickness is tricky. It sneaks up in odd moments, peeling potatoes, folding laundry, or hearing a snatch of a familiar tune hummed by another maid in the hallway. It shows up in your dreams, where everyone is still alive, the fields are green, and you wake up certain you can smell the Atlantic. You write letters home, editing out the worst parts, pretending everything is grand because you don't want your mother to worry. You read and reread her replies until the paper grows thin. But as the months pass, you start to find comfort in the new routine. You learn which bakery sells bread that's nearly as good as back home, where the market man will slip you a bruised apple for free, and which corner of the Badius Park catches the morning Sunday. You find friends, other girls with the same ache, the same stories, the same jokes about the food and the weather. You learn to laugh at the absurdity of it all, because if you didn't, you'd never stop crying. So yes, you miss Ireland, its hills, its rain, its warmth. You hate the snow, and sometimes you hate the city for being so big and so indifferent. But you endure, and little by little, the homesickness becomes a badge of honor. You carry Ireland with you, stitched into every memory, every laugh, every stubborn, hopeful plan for the future. And as you trudge through the dirty snow, you remind yourself you're not alone. Every step you take, cold feet and all, is another chapter in your own story. One that started in Ireland, but is being written right here, in the wild, slushy heart of New York. You serve tea to people with names like Mrs. Vanderbilty, and try not to laugh when they talk about slumming it downtown. You are invisible until someone needs to blame you for the missing biscuits. Let's open the parlor doors and usher you into a world of clinking china, tight-lipped smiles, and judgment so thick you could spread it on toast. The lady of the house loves to entertain, and as her maid, you get a front-row seat to the great pageant of high society, a parade of wealthy matrons, their hats piled high with feathers, pearls gleaming like judgmental eyes, and opinions sharper than the good silver you just spent an hour polishing. Tea time in the drawing room is your trial by fire. Your job? Glide in and out with a tray of fragile cups, a plate of cucumber sandwiches, and a face so neutral it could be mistaken for the wallpaper. The conversation, meanwhile, is anything but bland. The ladies talk loudly, as if you can't possibly understand their clever references to Paris or Newport, but just quietly enough to whisper juicy details about each other's families. You learn more in one afternoon than most people learn in a semester of sociology. They gossip about who wore what, whose husband is doing business with whom, and which new maid simply couldn't keep up with the housework. You quickly realize you are the living embodiment of the help. Invisible until your presence is inconvenient or a napkin goes missing. You become an expert in the art of silent service, refilling teacups, offering scones, and absorbing every veiled insult about the Irish temperament with the composure of a statue. Occasionally, someone will glance your way and ask a question just to see if you'll answer. Tell me, dear, do you find New York as exciting as all the papers say? You smile and give the safest answer you know, something cheerful, non-committal, and less revealing than a nun's diary. They nod approvingly, as if you've confirmed all their suspicions that maids are grateful. Simple creatures with no real thoughts of their own. Heaven forbid anything go wrong during these gatherings. The tea is too hot? Your fault. The sandwiches are too thin? Definitely your fault. The family dog howls at the wrong moment? Or someone discovers that the sugar bowl is missing its matching tongs? All eyes turn to you. Didn't we have another pair of tongs? Someone asks, voice full of suspicion, as if you've hidden them in your apron for a midnight snack. You apologize. Promise to look, and make a mental note to never, ever actually eat a biscuit in this house. But high society isn't all sharp edges. Every now and then you catch a wink or a kind word from another servant. A silent exchange of solidarity from the butler or the scullery maid who knows exactly how absurd it all is. Sometimes you overhear a guest admit she'd trade all the parlor gossip for an afternoon of real conversation and a walk in the park without a corset. In those moments, you realize that everyone is performing. Not just you, their stage just happens to be more lavishly decorated. The best survival skill? A thick skin and a sharper wit. Kept strictly internal, of course. You perfect the art of listening without hearing, watching without reacting, smiling without showing your teeth. You become invisible by choice, an expert at blending in, but you also remember everything. Who leaves a generous tip? Who treats the staff like furniture? Who complains the loudest but always manages to spill the most tea? At the end of the day, you escape to the kitchen with stories to share. Tales of Lady So-and-so's third helping of cake or Mrs. Vanderbilt's scandalous new hat. You trade laughs with the other maids, compare notes on the wildest rumors, and breathe easy, at least until the next bell rings. Dealing with the ladies' friends means serving tea, dodging blame, and sometimes biting your tongue hard enough to leave a mark. But you learn, you adapt, and you always, always know where the biscuits really went. Hint: the family dog is the true culprit, but you're not about to ruin his reputation in high society. The one sanctuary in your week is Mass, where everyone is Irish, everyone is tired, and everyone sings so loud it drowns out the rest of your problems. For 1 hour, you remember who you are. It's Sunday morning, and the city is surprisingly quiet. The clatter of streetcars, the shouts of market vendors, and even the barking of dogs all seem to take a collective breath. For you, this is the highlight of the week, a chance to step out of your uniform, leave behind the ever-growing pile of chores, and slip away to the cool shadows of St. Patrick's or whatever little parish is close enough to reach on foot. The bells ring out across the rooftops, calling to all the lost, lonely, and hopeful souls tucked into tenements, boarding houses, and servants' closets across the city. You walk with a small army of girls in simple dresses, hair pinned up, gloves mended, and boots polished as best you can manage. There's something sacred in this weekly migration, a procession of maids, porters, and labourers, each carrying secret worries and whispered prayers. The church is never empty. Even on the rainiest days, the pews are packed, the air thick with incense, musty hymnals, and the faint aroma of last night's onions clinging to the congregation. Inside, you are no one's servant. Here, nobody asks for tea or towels. Nobody yells about missed spots or burnt toast. You're just another daughter, another sister, another voice in a choir of voices that rises with a stubborn, joyful defiance. The priest's brogue is familiar and warm, reminding you of home and childhood, of simpler times when faith was easier and hope came free with every sunrise. Mass isn't just a religious obligation, it's an escape. For 60 precious minutes, you're surrounded by people who know your story without a single word spoken. There's comfort in the rituals, the well-worn prayers, and the music that fills every corner of your tired soul. The familiar hymns, sung loud and off-key by a congregation of sleep-deprived girls, seem to shake the very dust from the rafters. You close your eyes and let the words roll over you, remembering what it feels like to belong. After Mass, the church steps transform into the city's unofficial social club. Friends gather in little huddles, trading news from home and gossip from around the neighborhood. You swap stories about impossible employers, laugh at the week's misadventures, and compare recipes for soda bread or tips for whitening laundry with less soap. Some weeks, there's a charity bake sale or a game of kick the can in the street. Simple pleasures that help stitch together the tattered pieces of your week. Sometimes, you linger in the pews a little longer, offering up prayers for your family back in Ireland. A mother's health, a brother's job, a father's temper. You pray for courage, patience, and just a bit of good luck. And sometimes, you just sit in the silence, letting the hush settle in your pace, bones, holding on to the feeling of peace as long as you can. It's more than just faith that fills these walls. It's the feeling of community, of shared survival, of knowing you're not alone in your struggles or your longing. The older women in the parish know your name and your story before you introduce yourself. The little children cling to your skirts and beg for sweets. There's a sense that no matter how hard the city is, here you are seen, you are heard, and you matter. As you step back into the sunlight and the chaos of the city, you carry the strength of that hour with you, a reservoir of hope to draw from when the days stretch long and the nights feel endless. For 1 hour each week, you get to put down your burdens and remember who you are beneath the apron, the uniform, and the blisters. Church on Sunday isn't just an escape. It's a lifeline, a gentle reminder that you are more than what you do, and that somewhere, someone is always singing just for you. You catch a cold from a drafty window and spend the week sneezing into your apron while the mistress reminds you there's no such thing as a maid's holiday. The local doctor is more expensive than your annual salary. Let's be clear. Being sick as an Irish maid in 1900s New York is not for the faint of heart. Your head aches, your nose drips, and your joints feel like they've been oiled with lye soap and pessimism. But unless you've contracted something as dramatic as smallpox, or have actually collapsed in a heap on the kitchen floor, your illness is more of a character flaw than a medical condition in the eyes of your employers. We simply cannot manage without you, dear, the mistress says, her expression hovering somewhere between pity and mild irritation. The concept of rest is as foreign to this house as central heating. At first, you try to work through it. You stifle your coughs with a handkerchief and hope no one notices the increasingly creative color of your sneezes. Each trip up the stairs feels like climbing Mount Everest with bricks in your pockets, but the work won't do itself. The porridge still needs stirring, the silver still wants polishing, and the baby, who has a sixth sense for weakness, chooses this week to demand even more attention. Every whimper and wail feels personal, as if the whole world has organized a conspiracy against your sinuses. The other staff try to help, quietly slipping you a lemon or a bit of honey, whispering old country remedies they swear by. Wrap a red flannel round your neck, says Maggie, or rub goose grease on your chest. You'll try anything, even if it means smelling like a Sunday roast, but you still drag yourself through the day, catching snatches of rest while the soup simmers or the baby naps. Of course, you can forget about calling in sick. Sick days are for people who work in offices, not for the likes of you. If you mention you're feeling unwell, you're met with a sympathetic head tilt and a prompt reminder that, back in my day, we worked through typhoid. The mistress, who has never worked through so much as a mild headache, waxes nostalgic about her own robust constitution, while the master simply mutters about lowered standards and the Irish constitution. Apparently, the ability to scrub a floor with a fever is just another mark of moral fortitude. If your illness takes a turn for the worse, if you start to look more ghost than girl, the family might call for the doctor. The doctor, in his starched collar and air of medical authority, charges enough to make you wonder if he's treating you or your employer's wallet. He prescribes rest and broth, both of which are laughable. Rest is a myth, and broth only happens if you make it yourself. The family, meanwhile, will spend the next week muttering about the cost of keeping staff healthy, conveniently forgetting that the only thing more contagious than your cough is the guilt you feel every time you slow down. There's another side to this, though, a secret network of care among the staff and the neighbors. Someone slips you a homemade cough syrup, someone else covers an extra chore, and there's always advice, good, bad, or bewildering, from every auntie in a 3-block radius. You learn to ration your strength, to nap sitting up, to find moments of warmth and comfort where you can. Sometimes you even get a bit of sympathy from the children, who bring you a wilted flower or a crumbly biscuit in a rare act of kindness. Eventually, you recover. Your voice returns, and the world resumes its normal rhythm of dust and duty. No one throws you a parade, but you do feel a small surge of pride. You made it, again, because for Irish maids in New York, there are no sick days, only the stubborn refusal to give in, and maybe, just maybe, a little comfort in knowing you're tougher than the city that never sleeps. Life as a maid is risky. Between open flames, bad wiring, and the city's legendary rats, you've started sleeping with one eye open. Bedbugs are your constant, scratchy companions. Let's take inventory of your daily anxieties, shall we? If the long hours, impossible expectations, and soul-crushing homesickness weren't enough, you also get to share your life with an ever-present cast of hazards that seem ripped from a Gothic novel, minus the romance, plus a lot more vermin. Every night, as you squeeze yourself into your cot, you run through a mental checklist. Are the embers in the stove out? Did the oil lamp get blown out? Is there a mouse in your shoe? Is the scratching you hear just your imagination, or the beginning of a minor plague? First, the ever-present threat of fire. New York's buildings are packed tighter than a Sunday church pew, and everything, from the curtains to the mattresses to your own woolen nightdress, might as well be kindling. Stoves spit sparks, matches break and fly, and sometimes a lamp, knocked over by a stray elbow or a curious cat, becomes the opening act of neighborhood catastrophe. You quickly learn to move through the house like a ghost, tiptoeing around anything flammable and developing a sixth sense for the scent of singed wool. There's no fire brigade that arrives in time, only neighbors with buckets and shouts and a lot of panic. Bad wiring is another delightful modern invention. Some homes, eager to embrace progress, have electrical wires so ancient and unreliable they'd make Frankenstein nervous. Switches spark, sockets hiss. And every time you plug in the iron, you say a quick prayer that you won't be electrocuted into next week. The family takes the miracle of light for granted. You, meanwhile, take every opportunity to unplug anything not nailed down before bed. And then, there are the rats. These are not your storybook mice, content to steal a bit of cheese and scurry away. New York rats have the confidence of small dogs and the appetite of teenage boys. You hear them in the walls at night, holding conventions, plotting heists, or perhaps just racing to see who can scare you first. Sometimes you swear you see one tip its hat as it disappears behind the stove. If you leave out a single crumb, the entire extended rat family arrives for a midnight feast. You develop a sweep and scrub reflex so powerful you could probably clear out a parade route in seconds. But if the rats are bold, the bedbugs are relentless. Tiny, stealthy, and unkillable, they haunt every mattress, every seam of your only blanket, every crevice in your lumpy cot. No amount of boiling, scrubbing, or whispered curses seems to faze them. You scratch through the night, adding new constellations of bites to your arms and legs. The only thing that multiplies faster than your blisters is your collection of remedies. Vinegar, kerosene, even borrowing the mistress's precious lavender sachet in a desperate attempt to confuse the enemy. Let's not forget the other existential threats. Leaky ceilings, falling plaster, and the occasional mysterious puddle that appears and vanishes without explanation. On stormy nights, the wind howls through cracks in the window, and the roof rattles like it's trying to lift off and escape the city altogether. If you're really lucky, you'll be woken by a neighbor's baby crying at 3 a.m. or the sound of police whistles signaling a minor riot outside. In the face of all this, you get tough. You learn to keep a pail of water near the stove, your boots tucked up off the floor, and a heavy book nearby for rat emergencies. You develop a sense of humor so dry it could soak up leaks, and an appreciation for the absurdities of life. Because otherwise, you'd never sleep at all. You swap horror stories with other maids, comparing bite marks and sharing tips for outsmarting rodents, as if you're all veterans in the same slightly ridiculous army. At the end of the day, you survive not just in spite of these threats, but because of them. Each new scar, each scratchy night, each near miss with an open flame is proof that you're still here, resilient, resourceful, and absolutely determined. In a city of hazards, you may sleep with one eye open, but at least you're still dreaming. And, if you're lucky, you'll wake up to find the house still standing and your sense of humor mostly intact. The streets are full of colorful characters. You learn to cross the road when you see a policeman. Not because you're guilty, but because it's a reflex now. Central Park is beautiful, but also full of drunk poets and lost goats. Step out of the house, and you're in a different jungle, a place where the only thing more unpredictable than the weather is the company you'll keep. The city is bursting with all sorts: peddlers, musicians, preachers, pickpockets, flower sellers, and the ever-present swirl of children darting through crowds. You're on constant alert, the same way you'd watch for a loose cow back in Ireland. Except, here it's more likely to be a runaway fruit cart or a vendor launching bagels like frisbees. You clutch your coins and your dignity as you make your way to the market or to church, because a simple walk can feel like navigating an obstacle course designed by someone with a particularly dark sense of humor. Every block offers a new surprise: a preacher on a soapbox declaring the world's end, a man with a dancing monkey, or a trio of boys making a game out of seeing who can jump the highest off a stoop. Occasionally, you catch a glimpse of high society parading down Fifth Avenue, all silk and stiff collars, pretending they don't notice the beggar on the corner or the argument brewing in the alley. Policemen, in theory, are there to keep the peace. In reality, you learn the dance, look busy, keep your head down, and cross the street long before you're close enough for them to decide you're loitering. It's nothing personal. It's just that, as a young Irish maid, you're used to being on the wrong end of suspicion, even if all you're carrying is a loaf of bread and a bag of turnips. Stories make the rounds, maids accused of theft, of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or just of being cheeky with the wrong person. You take no chances. If you ever are spoken to, you keep your answers short and your hands where they can see them, and pray you remember the right address. Your rare moments of escape take you to Central Park, a patch of green meant to remind you of home, but never quite managing it. On Sundays, you and the other girls go walking, pretending not to notice the muddy puddles or the crowd of rowdy boys practicing baseball with a rock and a stick. It's lovely, until you realize you're sharing the path with a staggering poet muttering lines to a seagull, an accordion player who knows exactly one tune, and, occasionally, an actual goat that no one seems to claim. There's a kind of camaraderie among the city's outsiders. You exchange glances with other maids, share a bench with an old lady who offers you half an apple, and once, memorably, help a flower seller retrieve his cart from a ditch. Everyone is hustling. Everyone has somewhere to be, and no one seems entirely sure how they'll get there. If you linger too long in one spot, you're likely to be swept up in a parade, a protest, or a spontaneous street performance that leaves you clapping with the crowd and wondering how you'll explain your muddy shoes to the mistress. But not everything is charming. The city has a dark side. Men with too much time and not enough manners, who catcall from doorways or follow a few paces too close. You learn to keep to the main roads, to walk in groups when you can, and to carry your keys between your fingers, just in case. If you're harassed, you walk faster and hope for a friendly face or a well-timed trolley to jump onto. Despite the hazards, the city outdoors becomes its own strange kind of freedom. You see faces from a dozen countries, languages you don't understand, and, every now and then, a patch of grass or a clump of flowers that makes you smile. You learn to laugh at the oddities, roll your eyes at the petty crime, and, above all, keep moving. There's a whole world beyond the kitchen, messy and dangerous and dizzying, but it's yours to navigate, as long as you remember the cardinal rule. In New York, the sidewalk is for the bold, and survival means always looking both ways. Some girls sneak out to take night classes, hoping for a job that doesn't involve scrubbing chamber pots. You read books by candlelight and imagine a life where your hands don't smell like onions. Let's get honest about ambition. Even when you're knee-deep in soap suds and the air smells suspiciously like boiled cabbage, you dare to hope for more. The grind of scrubbing, sweeping, and serving is constant, but so is the quiet, insistent thrum of longing for something better. It's there. When you stare out the kitchen window, hands raw from lie, watching streetcars rumble past. It's in the back of your mind as you polish the silver, eyes drifting to the parlor bookshelf with its row of fat, important-looking volumes. Books, what a luxury! A whole world inside a battered cover, just waiting for someone with the time and clean hands to explore it. It starts with rumors. Maybe you overhear another maid whispering in the hallway. Mary's going to night school. Night school. The very words are electric, thrilling, terrifying, and maybe a little forbidden. You want to know more? but you're careful not to sound too eager. What's she studying, you ask, feigning nonchalance. Typing, comes the answer. Or bookkeeping, I think. She wants to be a secretary. Says her cousin's friend got a job in an office, and now she wears gloves to work. Gloves to work! Imagine a life so clean, so gentle. Your hands never again see a potato peel. Getting out to a night class is no simple task. You can't exactly ask the mistress for an early supper so you can go better yourself. Instead, you finish your chores at double speed, slip out the back door with your heart in your throat, and walk briskly through city streets lit by gas lamps and gossip. Maybe your employer doesn't approve. Or maybe you're just afraid she'll say yes and ask why you're not content with honest work. Either way, you move quickly, clutching your coins and your courage. The classroom is a revelation. Hard benches, flickering lamps, and a teacher who smells faintly of chalk and dreams. The other girls, Polish, German, Italian, Irish, share the same look. Tired, hopeful, determined. You learn the basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, maybe even a bit of shorthand if you're lucky. The lessons are difficult at first. Your hands cramp, your eyelids droop, and you worry you'll never keep up. But slowly, things start to click. Letters form words, numbers add up, and for the first time, in ages, your mind stretches further than the nearest mop bucket. Back at home, you hide your books under the cot or in a flour sack, reading by candlelight when the house is asleep. You puzzle over sentences and practice your penmanship, dreaming of the day you'll write a letter not just home to Ireland, but for pay, at a desk, in an office with windows that look out over the city. Sometimes you can almost taste it, the freedom, the pride, the dignity of not being the help forever. Of course, not everyone believes. Some girls say you're getting ideas above your station, or that there's no real escape for girls like you. Others laugh and tell you you're just as likely to end up back in a kitchen, only this time with a fancier apron. But still, you persist, fueled by hope and a stubborn refusal to settle. You remind yourself of the women who came before you, who crossed oceans and braved cities, and still found ways to carve out something new. So you keep sneaking to class, keep reading, keep dreaming. Because maybe, just maybe, if you're lucky, determined, and just bold enough, there's a life out there waiting for you. A life with clean hands, soft gloves, and a future that's yours to write. And until then, you'll keep learning by lamplight, turning each page towards something better. Years pass. Maybe you save enough to move out. Maybe you marry. Maybe you don't. But you know that the city is full of girls just like you, each one scrubbing, dreaming, and building something new on the bones of yesterday's bread. Let's take a moment to look up from the endless cycle of chores and see the bigger picture. You started as just another Irish girl stepping off the boat, heart full of hope, pockets nearly empty, and calluses forming before your first week's pay. At first, every day was about survival, about sending money home, keeping out of trouble, and keeping the mistress from noticing that your knees had started creaking like the floorboards. But as the years tumble by, something subtle begins to shift. Maybe it's a new confidence, a softening of old scars, or simply the quiet pride that comes from enduring, adapting, and not just surviving, but slowly, stubbornly thriving. You're not alone in this. The city is teeming with girls who look a little like you, who laugh at the same jokes, who walk with the same determination through crowded markets and church doors. You spot them by the way they tie their aprons, by the gentle brogue that slips out when they're tired, or by the way they scan the streets with the practiced caution of someone who's learned to watch for more than just puddles. You swap stories, recipes, warnings, and the best places to buy a loaf that's still warm in the morning. These girls become your family, your legacy, your proof that you're not just a footnote in someone else's story. If you're lucky, or simply too stubborn to give up, you save enough to rent a room of your own, maybe in a building where the landlady's only rule is no loud arguments after midnight. Maybe you move in with a cousin, or with another maid, or with a friend you met in night school. The room is small, but it's yours. You buy curtains, pin a picture to the wall, and discover the strange satisfaction of being able to leave dishes in the sink for as long as you like. Some of the girls get married to a dock worker, a shopkeeper, a fireman with strong hands and a soft heart. Some don't. Some become the housekeepers, managing whole households with an iron will and a well-hidden stash of emergency biscuits. Some leave service altogether, using their hard-won savings to open a shop, run a boarding house, or even, if the stars align, work in one of those newfangled offices with typewriters and telephones. But no matter where you end up, your mark is everywhere. The city itself is shaped by your hands. The floors you scrubbed, the children you cared for, the meals you cooked with nothing but potatoes and a prayer. The next wave of newcomers finds the paths you helped carve. Irish, Italian, German, and more. Each generation leaving its own patchwork on the city's quilt. The old prejudices slowly start to fade, replaced by new accents, new stories, and new dreams. On quiet evenings, you pause and look back at the life you've built, the laughter you've shared, the sorrows you've survived. Maybe you're still sending money home, but now it's for a niece or nephew, a cousin making their own way across the Atlantic. Maybe you take a younger girl under your wing, teaching her how to make soda bread, or reminding her that no matter what the lady of the house says, a broken plate isn't the end of the world. Your legacy is not in monuments or medals, but in everyday victories. In the letter from home that says we're proud of you, in the small circle of friends you trust, in the next generation who will never know the taste of true hunger or the sting of being just the help. You built something out of nothing, made a life in a place that never promised you anything, and, in doing so, helped build a city. So, as the years pass, you realize you are part of a living history, a story written in sweat, laughter, and 1,000 tiny acts of courage. And that, more than anything, is the true legacy of every Irish maid who ever called New York home. It's Saturday, which means it's time for your weekly bath. If you can call squatting in a tin tub behind the kitchen stove a bath, you haul buckets of hot water, test the temperature with a toe and a prayer, and try not to think about who used the soap before you. Privacy is provided by a curtain that only covers the left half of your dignity, and the family's youngest child is guaranteed to barge in at least once. Let's set the mood. The kitchen is already thick with the smell of cabbage and coal by the time you declare it bath time. In some families, this means a leisurely soak in a marble tub with lavender salts and a slice of lemon for your water. In your world, it means wresting a battered tin tub from its hiding spot, scrubbing out last week's mysterious residue, and dragging it behind the stove, where at least the draft is bearable, and the heat can help unthaw your frozen toes. First, the ritual of water hauling. This is less a gentle fill and more a full-body workout. You scoop, you lift, you slosh boiling water from the kettle into the tub, then top it off with a dash of cold water. Too much, and you risk hypothermia. Too little, and you risk a scald that will keep you limping all week. You swear you can feel your muscles growing with every trip, and by the time the tub is ready, your arms are as sore as if you'd spent the day arm wrestling with the master's bulldog. The moment arrives. You wedge yourself into the tin tub, knees pressed to chin, elbows scraping the sides, trying to convince yourself that full immersion is overrated. The soap is a communal brick, shared by the family, the other staff, and, as you sometimes suspect, the family dog. It squeaks alarmingly as you scrub, leaving you cleaner than before, but also oddly exfoliated in places you didn't mean to exfoliate. Privacy is a rare commodity. The bathroom curtain is little more than a tea towel strung on a bit of twine, flapping in the breeze and covering precisely nothing that actually needs covering. You learn to bathe with a sort of graceful haste, always listening for footsteps on the stairs, knowing that a knock, or worse, a sudden silence, means you've got about 3 seconds before the youngest child bursts in, full of questions about why you're so pink, or demands to use the chamber pot right now. And then the sharing. Bath water is not wasted in a household where every penny counts. After you're done, you might pass the tub to the next maid or the family's children, each taking their turn until the water is more soup than soak. You try not to think about it. Hygiene, after all, is relative. You dry off with a towel that's seen better days, and you're lucky if it's less damp than you are. If you're feeling fancy, maybe you dust yourself with a pinch of talc or pin a fresh ribbon in your hair. But most nights you're just grateful to be clean-ish and done. There's an odd camaraderie in the ritual. The other maids tease you about your squeals when the water's too cold, and you compare battle scars, scalds, bruises, and the odd mystery rash from sharing soap. You swap stories about the fanciest bath you've ever seen or imagined, laugh about the time the dog jumped in with Maggie, and bond over the universal longing for a real, honest-to-goodness soak in a private tub, doors locked and water hot from start to finish. Bath night is humbling, hilarious, and, sometimes, oddly restorative. You emerge with flushed cheeks and the smug satisfaction of a job well done, ready to slip into your worn nightdress and collapse into bed, the last traces of coal dust swirling down the drain behind you. And as you drift off to sleep, you promise yourself that someday, somewhere, you'll have a bathroom with a real door, a tub big enough for dreaming, and a bar of soap all your own. For now, you settle for scalds, squeaks, and shared soap, because that, in 1900s, New York, is what victory looks like. Once a month, you sit by candlelight, hunched over a scrap of paper, squeezing your homesickness into neat lines and carefully practiced script. Every letter is a mixture of half-truths, bravado, and a heavy dose of everything's grand. Ma'am, even as you drip tears onto the page and try not to mention the time you burned the roast and almost burned down the house. Let's step into the hush of your tiny room on letter night, when even the city's clamor seems to fade, leaving just the scratch of your pencil and the flicker of candlelight to keep you company. You save your best paper for this moment, one precious sheet, slightly creased from its journey across the Atlantic, and an envelope borrowed from last week's pay. Ink is rationed, your pen nib chews the page, and your thoughts stumble over themselves, desperate to travel home faster than any steamship. You begin with the pleasantries. The weather is always fine, even if you're writing with a shawl around your shoulders and rain dripping down the window. You tell Ma'am about your work, but not the hours or the blisters. You say the food is good, plenty of potatoes, and you don't mention that you're tired of the sight of them, that sometimes you dream of nothing but a fresh egg or a slice of soda bread still warm from the oven. You ask after neighbors, cousins, the parish priest, anyone whose memory brings a flicker of warmth to your chilly closet. As you write, you feel the ache of longing behind every sentence. You want to say, "I miss you so much it hurts," or "I sometimes forget the sound of your voice, and that scares me more than the rats." But you don't. Instead, you brag about learning to make stew without burning it, usually true, or share the latest neighborhood gossip. Mrs. Kelly's cat had kittens, and one looks just like Father Murphy. You keep it light, because you know what worry can do to a mother across the sea. Some nights, the homesickness is so sharp that your eyes fill before you've even finished your greeting. The tears are sneaky, falling when you write about the way the city smells after rain, or how the bells from the church down the block remind you of Sunday mornings at home. You blot the page carefully, willing your words to stand tall and not swim away in puddles of ink and emotion. There are confessions too, though always veiled in humor. Had a little trouble with the stove this week, you might write, carefully omitting the fact that the kitchen still smells faintly of singed hair and panic. The lady's youngest locked himself in the pantry, and I had to bribe him out with biscuits. You know Mam will laugh, and you hope she won't read too much into your choice of stories. Tucked inside, you add tokens, a pressed clover, a bit of ribbon, maybe a photograph if you can manage it. It's proof you're still you, still remembering, still loving from afar. Sometimes you include a little money, folded tight and hidden between lines, even if it means going without a treat for yourself that month. The guilt, the pride, and the longing all swirl together, pressed flat by the weight of a single precious stamp. Before you finish, you pause, searching for the right words. How do you say everything you feel? How do you bridge oceans with just a handful of sentences? You settle for promises. I'll write again soon. Tell little Tom I miss him. I'm thinking of you every day. You sign your name with a flourish, blow gently to dry the ink, and seal the envelope with the hope that it finds your family safe, healthy, and thinking of you too. Letter written, you. Sit back and let the loneliness settle, just for a minute, before you tuck the note away for posting and climb into bed. In the quiet, you remember that this simple act, writing, hoping, loving across the miles, is its own kind of survival. The letters go out, the answers return, and so the lifeline between two worlds holds strong, written in hope, sealed with soggy tears. You learn quickly that New Yorkers have opinions, loud, inaccurate, and usually about you. Some folks assume you're an expert at drinking, fighting, or singing ballads about dead kings. Meanwhile, you're just trying to survive the grocery list and not trip over the family's taxidermied poodle. You nod, you smile, and occasionally you correct them, very politely, and only after they've paid you. Let's be honest. If there's one thing you never left behind on the boat, it's everyone else's ideas about what it means to be the Irish girl. The stereotypes hit you as soon as you open your mouth. The accent is a dead giveaway. Ah, from Ireland, are you? My grandmother was Irish, people say, as if this entitles them to ask whether you keep a shillelagh under your bed or have ever seen a leprechaun at a crossroads. You learn to answer with humor. Only on Tuesdays, you say. Or sure, but only if the moon is full. Sarcasm sails straight over most heads, but it keeps you sane. You quickly realize that some people expect you to be half saint, half troublemaker, and possibly a little magical on the side. You must have a fiery temper, they exclaim, usually after you've spent all morning biting your tongue through a customer's complaints. I'll bet you can hold your liquor, says the shopkeeper, sliding an extra bottle your way for street, Patrick's Day. Little do they know your idea of a wild night is getting to sleep before midnight with both your socks still matching. There's also the notion that you're born knowing how to fight, either with fists, words, or wooden spoons. Never mind that you've never so much as slapped a mosquito without apologizing to it first. The local butcher's boy tries to impress you with stories of Irish rebels, and you let him because it's easier than explaining that the only uprising you've ever led was a revolt against boiled turnips. Of course, music is another minefield. Any room with more than 3 Irish people becomes a potential concert in the eyes of Americans. Sing us a ballad, someone inevitably pleads, thrusting you into the spotlight. You give them the first verse of Danny Boy. Or, if you're feeling cheeky, a few lines of the rocky road to Dublin, and they melt with nostalgia for a country they've only ever seen on postcards. The truth is, you can carry a tune well enough to lull a crying baby, but you'd rather save your voice for prayers and arguments. Sometimes, the stereotypes turn sour. There are whispers about Irish maids being unreliable, troublemakers, or fond of the drink. Employers check that silver before you leave a room, and the neighbors watch you cross the street with the suspicion usually reserved for stray dogs and politicians. You work twice as hard to prove yourself, keeping your head down and your voice soft, until the day the mistress complains that you lack the Irish spirit, and you want to ask if that's the same as the one she keeps in her sherry decanter. But even as you roll your eyes at these assumptions, you find moments to reclaim them, turn them on their heads, and laugh. Yes, you'll sing a ballad if it means getting through another miserable Monday. Yes, you have a fiery spirit, but it's mostly reserved for cleaning stubborn stains and defending your portion of stew. And yes, you'll celebrate St. Patrick's Day with everyone else, even if it's just an excuse for a bit of colour and laughter in a city that forgets to look up from its own shoes. In the end, the real magic is in how you take those tired old stereotypes and make them your own, filling them with kindness, patience, and a stubborn refusal to be boxed in by anyone's imagination but your own. You become more than the Irish maid. You become indispensable, surprising, and, if you're lucky, the only one who knows where the good biscuits are hidden, and that, as any true Irish girl will tell you, is a skill worth more than all the ballads in the world. So here we are, drifting back to the soft light of your own bedroom, far from the clatter of pans, the scratchy wool uniforms, and the never-ending echoes of miss. The floor's still dirty. If you've made it this far, you've survived a night as an Irish immigrant maid in 1900s New York, a world of sleepless mornings, impossible demands, and a whole lot of potatoes. Let's take a moment, beneath your own clean sheets, to reflect on just how much those maids endured. Scrubbing floors with hands already raw, fighting homesickness with every penny sent home, and facing down generations of snooty stares with a level of sarcastic humor that honestly deserves its own monument in Central Park. They built a new life in a city that never slept, rarely said thank you, and often expected everything for next to nothing. And somehow, they kept going. They built families, communities, and the backbone of modern America, one blindingly polished candlestick at a time. So tonight, as you drift off in the comfort of central heating and your own pillow that isn't stuffed with last year's rags, maybe send a silent thank you to those maids who made it possible for the rest of us to dream a little bigger. Remember, behind every well-fed millionaire and every sparkling brownstone, there was someone quietly holding it all together, usually with a mop in one hand and a dream of something better in the other. Because history is a story of stubborn, hilarious, hopeful people who managed to turn suffering into strength and chores into courage. Life for those Irish maids was hard, but they survived with laughter, wit, and just enough rebellion to make sure their story would outlive even the toughest stains. So let your eyes close now, grateful for a bed that's yours, a room with a door, and a world where you don't have to worry about running out of lye soap. Sleep well, and whisper a thank you to the past, for all the unsung heroines, and for the fact that tomorrow, the only uniform you'll wear is your pajamas. Good night.